Little is known about Celia's origins or early childhood. In 1850, Robert Newsom, a yeoman farmer, acquired Celia, who was about 14 years old and born around 1835 in Audrin County. He brought her into his household to serve as his concubine following the death of his wife the previous year. Around 1819, Robert Newsom left Virginia and traveled west, eventually settling in Callaway County, Missouri, with his wife and children. By 1850, Newsom had become a prosperous man, owning 800 acres of land, a successful farm, and 5 male slaves. Newsom's wife died in 1849, and less than a year later, in 1850, Newsom traveled to Audrin County to purchase Celia, his first female slave. It is likely that Newsom assaulted the 14-year-old Celia during the journey back to Callaway County. Once on Newsom's property in Callaway County, Celia was given her own cabin about 50 feet from the main house, where she lived separately from Newsom's male slaves. Between 1850 and 1855, Newsom repeatedly assaulted Celia, who bore 2 children during those 5 years, at least one of whom was fathered by Newsom. Before 1855, Celia began a romantic relationship with George, one of Newsom's other slaves. In 1855, Celia became pregnant for a 3rd time, with the child likely fathered by either George or Newsom. George gave Celia an ultimatum, telling her he would have nothing more to do with her if she did not quit the old man. Celia pleaded with Newsom's family members and with Newsom himself. Around June 23, 1855, Celia begged Newsom to leave her alone because she was sick and pregnant. Newsom refused and told her he would come to her cabin that night. Celia threatened Newsom, warning she would hurt him if he assaulted her again. After their conversation, Celia found a large stick and placed it in the corner of her cabin. On the night of June 23, 1855, after the family had gone to bed, Robert Newsom came to Celia's cabin as he had promised. Celia tried to reject his advances, but when he refused to back down, she struck him over the head with the stick she had brought into her cabin earlier that day. After the first blow, he reached out as if to grab her, so she hit him a 2nd time, killing him. She then moved his body into her fireplace and spent the rest of the night burning his remains. She crushed some of his smaller bones with a rock and hid the larger bones under the hearth and the floor between a sleeper and the fireplace. The next morning, Celia enlisted the help of Newsom's 12-year-old grandson, Coffee Wayne Scott, to scatter the ashes. According to Coffee's testimony, Celia promised him 2 dozen walnuts if he helped carry the ashes out. On the morning of June 24, 1855, Robert Newsom's daughters grew worried when he did not appear for breakfast. They searched the property and, when unsuccessful, enlisted the help of neighbors. William Powell, the owner of a neighboring farm, and Newsom's sons, Harry and David, joined the search party. Powell questioned George about Newsom's whereabouts, and George suggested that it was not worthwhile to hunt for him anywhere except close round the house. He also indicated that he believed the last walking Newsom had done was along the path, pointing to the path leading from the house to Celia's cabin. After finding nothing in Celia's cabin, William Powell interrogated Celia, who had not attempted to flee after killing her owner and had instead resumed her normal activities. Initially, Celia denied any knowledge of Newsom's fate, but Powell's persistent accusations and threats eventually led her to confess. Celia admitted to killing Newsom and attempting to dispose of his body, though she claimed she had not intended to kill him, but only to hurt him. Following Celia's confession, the family gathered evidence of Robert Newsom's remains and collected them in a box. The next day, June 25, 1855, David Newsom filed an affidavit, and a warrant for inquest was issued. A 6-man inquest jury was summoned to Robert Newsom's estate to hear testimonies from William Powell, Coffee Wayne Scott, and Celia. After reviewing the testimonies, the jury determined there was probable cause to arrest Celia for the murder of Robert Newsom. Celia was arrested and sent to Callaway County Jail to await her trial in October. Following her arrest, Celia was interrogated once more in her cell by Jefferson Jones to determine if she had acted alone. Despite Jones's persistent questioning, Celia repeatedly denied receiving any assistance in killing Robert Newsom or burning his body. Celia was formally indicted by a grand jury on August 16, 1855. On the same day, Judge William Augustus Hall appointed her defense team, led by John Jameson. On October 9, 1855, Celia appeared before the Callaway County Circuit Court to be tried by a jury of 12 white men. She entered a plea of not guilty, and the trial officially began. The prosecution's first witness was Colonel Jefferson Jones, who had interviewed Celia in her cell after her indictment and arrest. He recounted that Celia had told him the old man had been having sexual intercourse with her, and that on the night of the murder she had warned him not to come, that if he came, she would hurt him. Jones then described how Celia had killed Newsom and disposed of his body, according to her account. During cross-examination, the defense focused on the sexual relationship between Newsom and Celia, highlighting that her second child was his, and that the deceased forced her on the way home from Callaway County. Although Jones stated that he could not say positively whether Newsom had forced Celia during the trip from Callaway County to Callaway County, he mentioned that it was heard that he did, suggesting that he likely heard this from Celia herself. The defense also questioned Jones about Celia's motives, and Jones testified that Celia had told him she did not intend to kill, but only to hurt him. However, the prosecution objected to this line of questioning. Judge Hall sustained the objection, and Jones's response was stricken from the record. The prosecution's next witness was Harry Newsom, son of Robert Newsom. He was questioned about the investigation into his father's disappearance on the morning of Sunday, June 24, 1855. Harry described joining the search party and discovering some bones a short distance from Celia's cabin along the path. He and his sister Virginia Wainscott collected the bone fragments they found and placed them in a box, which they then left with Mr. Bentley, the circuit court clerk. Next, the prosecution called Virginia Wainscott, Robert Newsom's eldest daughter, to the stand. When questioned about the investigation into her father's disappearance, Wainscott described how she had hunted on all the paths and walks and every place for him before she learned where the bones were put on the evening of June 24, 1855. She recounted finding bones in the ashes in and around Celia's cabin, along with a buckle, buttons, and a knife, which she identified as her father's belongings. During the defense's cross-examination, Wainscott testified that Celia had been sick, took sick in February, and had been sick ever since, suggesting the defense was attempting to build sympathy for Celia among the jury. The defense also questioned Wainscott about her father's sleeping arrangements on the night of the murder, but Wainscott provided little information, stating that she did not notice the bed in which her father had supposedly slept. Robert Newsom's grandson, Coffee Wainscott, was the next witness to take the stand. He testified that he had been up in the cherry tree early in the morning Grandpa was missing, and that Celia had offered him 24 walnuts if he would carry the ashes out of her cabin. Coffee agreed to Celia's offer and spread the ashes along the side of the path, later witnessing the search party picking bones up out of the ashes. During cross-examination, the defense questioned Coffee about his grandfather's sleeping arrangements on the night of the murder, similar to their questioning of his mother, Virginia Wainscott. Coffee provided little information, other than mentioning that his 4-year-old brother, Billy, had been sleeping in the same room as their grandfather that night. The prosecution next called William Powell, Robert Newsom's neighbor, to the stand. Powell, who had led the investigation into Newsom's disappearance, recounted how and where the search party had discovered Newsom's bones. During cross-examination, Celia's defense team questioned Powell about his interrogation of Celia on June 23, 1855. Powell testified that Celia had confessed to Newsom's murder only after he had repeatedly threatened her, telling her that it would be better for her to confess, as her children would not be taken away if she did, and that he had a rope ready for her if she did not cooperate. Powell also stated that Celia had mentioned she had threatened to hurt him if he did not stop forcing her while she was sick, and that she did not want to kill him but only wanted to hurt him. Finally, the prosecution called Dr. Smith and Dr. Young to the stand to examine the bones collected from the ashes in and around Celia's cabin. Both doctors testified that the bones were from an adult human. The defense's first witness was Dr. James M. Martin, a physician. The defense aimed to create doubt in the jurors' minds about whether Celia, acting alone, could have killed Newsom and disposed of his body as described by the prosecution. They asked Dr. Martin, could a human body be destroyed by burning in a common fireplace from 10 o'clock p.m. to 4 o'clock a.m.? The prosecution objected to this question, and Judge Hall upheld the objection. The defense attempted to rephrase the question twice, but each time the prosecution objected, and Judge Hall sustained the objection, forcing the defense to abandon that line of questioning. Next, the defense called Thomas Schoepman to the stand. Schoepman had been present during Celia's interrogation by Jefferson Jones in July following her arrest. The defense questioned Schoepman about the reasons Celia had given for striking Newsom. He testified that Celia had said she struck Newsom the first time only to hurt him, to prevent him from having sexual intercourse with her, and that she delivered the second blow because he threw his hands up and she was afraid he would catch her. Through Schoteman's testimony, the defense aimed to convince the jurors that Celia had acted in self-defense when she killed Newsom. Both the defense and prosecution were permitted to submit proposed jury instructions to Judge Hall, who had the discretion to accept or reject them. Celia's defense team submitted several instructions, requesting that the jury acquit Celia if it believed she had killed Robert Newsom while justifiably resisting sexual assault. At the time in Missouri, it was a crime to take any woman unlawfully against her will and by force, menace, or duress, compel her to be defiled, and resistance to such an offense could be a justifiable reason for a woman to kill her assailant. The defense argued that any woman, including enslaved women, and that Celia should not be convicted if the jury believed she had been trying to resist rape when she killed Newsom. Judge Hall did not accept these proposed instructions, and they were not presented to the jury. The instructions given to the jury did not address the motive behind Celia's crime or permit an acquittal based on the justification of using physical force to resist sexual assault by her master. On October 10, 1855, the jury convicted Celia of first-degree murder. The day after the jury's verdict, Celia's defense team requested that the court set aside the verdict of the jury and grant a new trial. Judge Hall denied the request and sentenced Celia to be hanged by the neck until dead on the 16th day of November, 1855. The defense team then sought an appeal to the Supreme Court of Missouri. Although the appeal was granted, Judge Hall refused to issue a stay of execution, meaning Celia would not be protected from execution before her appeal was heard. On the night of November 11, 1855, just 5 days before her scheduled execution, Celia escaped Callaway County Jail. She remained at large until the beginning of December to prevent her death before the Supreme Court could rule on her case. Harry Newsom returned Celia to the jail after she escaped, and she was given a new execution date of December 21st. Following her return, Celia's defense team wrote to Judge Abel Leonard of the Supreme Court of Missouri, expressing their concern that Celia had been taken out by someone and asserting that they had more than ordinary interest in behalf of the girl, believing she had killed Newsom to prevent a forced sexual assault. They included a record of Celia's case and requested a stay of execution to ensure that Celia would not be executed before the Supreme Court had reviewed her case. The Supreme Court responded on December 14, 1855, stating that, upon an examination of the record and proceedings of the Circuit Court of Callaway County in the above case, it is thought proper to refuse the prayer of the petitioner. It is therefore ordered by the court that an order for the stay of execution in this case be refused. Celia was hanged on December 21, 1855, at 2:30 p.m.